Welcome back to SledgeHammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Today, I am joined by the multifaceted, amazing Jeremy Decarlos. How you doing today, brother?
Well, man, thanks for having me on. Thanks for having me.
Hey, no, this is really a pleasure for me. He may look a little familiar to you guys. The reason why, he's an actor, writer, musician with a Bachelor of Arts in Theater Performance. You may recognize him from the amazingly underrated The Taking of Deborah Logan. Now, after earning his BA from Winthrop University, you did travel after that for a lot of the film and a lot of acting and things of that sort. Now, what was it like being a part of The Taking of Deborah Logan? I want to talk about that first.
As time has gone on, it's interesting to kind of lock into the legacy of it. We've seen a lot of really positive reviews and a lot of great response from it. So it makes the time really kind of worth it. It's rare that you get to be a part of something really special like that. If I'm being honest, man, it was one of the hardest shoots, one of the most difficult sets that I've ever been on. And to date, it is still the one movie that I am absolutely shocked actually got made. It was kind of harrowing there for a little bit.
Wow, man, that's crazy to hear. And the thing about the movie is it still to this day has one of my favorite ambiguous endings of all time. Like the ending really makes you go, what's going on here? And if you guys haven't seen The Taking of Deborah Logan, I can't recommend it enough. It really does take some twists and turns along the way. If you're not a fan of snakes, you should definitely watch it.
I gotta say, man, the snakes. I do have a quick anecdote about that, man. Like,
yeah,
even the guys on set, like everybody, the cast, the crew, like I don't think there was anybody on the project that was like, "Yay, snakes!" We had a night. If you've seen the movie, there's a scene where we call us the Scooby-Doo trio. There's a scene where the trio is running around. We're trying to find the remains of one of the characters, and we get this sack of remains, and we open it up, and the gag is that there's supposed to be all these snakes that come out, right? So it's like 4 o'clock in the morning. We're shooting this thing. We've been on set for like 10 hours. Everybody is just completely, dogged, and we get to this bit, and we bring in the snake handlers. And I got a video of this. I'm so proud. But like, there's like 30, 40 people in this very small room trying to get this gag going. We're running the scene. We open the bag and we're supposed to go, snakes, and they come all slithering out.
Yeah.
And these snakes were so cool that they were just hanging out, chilling in the back of the bag, and they wouldn't come out. Right. And so we open the bag. We're like, snakes, I get. And like, we're shaking the bag to make sure they come out. So in between takes, we're trying to wrangle these snakes. And at a certain point, we hear someone over say, "Wait a second, how many snakes do we have? I thought we had this many snakes. I'm only counting, wait, hold up." And it's like a slow burn throughout the whole room of like, how many snakes, how many snakes? And then there was the giant like announcement, "Okay, everybody, hold on. We're missing some snakes." And like that room cleared out. I ran out on the porch of this house, and one of the camera guys was standing on a ladder. And I looked at him and I was like, "Snakes?" And he goes, "Yeah, snakes." And,
it's universal at that point.
Oh yeah, everybody was feeling it. We were tired, and yeah, if you're not a fan of snakes,
That's great, man. And it's funny because as scary as snakes are, that's probably the least scariest thing in the film, which is to me the funniest thing, because in real life, you look at this and on the surface, you're going to think, oh, the snakes. But really, a lot of the underlying heavy shit is really the scariest shit about the film. And it's funny because not only are you an actor, but like I said, you are a musician, and you're an ear-trained musician. And something also that's super rad that I want to talk about, you taught yourself how to play guitar and co-founded the short-lived power punk trio called Good Not Evil. And man, opening for Afro Man, Wednesday 13, and the Murder Dolls, like that is so sick, man. So are you still doing music now?
Yeah, still doing music. I kind of broadened my horizons from the power punk trio. Like I dabbled with this sounds dumb, but I dabbled with theme park performance for a little bit. We did an entire summer of a show that was based on School of Rock. And the medal that I take from it is that we did about 200 shows that summer, and I played in every single one of them.
That's sick, dude.
And it was like to an audience of at least 800 people a pop. So it was a theme park, but you know, like the experience of it, we were rock stars, man, for real. Like I definitely got minted there, and from there, I started playing kind of freelance. I'm a studio musician. Also started jumping into a lot of musical theater, so I started understanding what it was like to play music to an atmosphere and to try to create emotion in a certain moment. You know, like one of my favorite shows was a musical theater piece called Fly by Night, and it's an interesting story, this show, but it was one of those experiences where by the end of it, like it was so emotional and so powerful that like I'm almost crying backstage as I'm playing guitar. So it was really interesting experience. Yeah.
So I mean, I know this is like picking your kids, but gun to your head, you got to choose between being a musician and being an actor. What's your final choice there?
Ooh, man. It is really difficult to choose one because both of them have this emotionality to it where if you're doing it right, man, it can really move mountains. It can really move your soul. I would have to say, since I started with it, I would say acting, because the challenge of creating characters and kind of generating emotion from an audience while you're on your feet, and there's nothing to hide behind. If I'm playing music, I can be behind a stage, I can be in a studio somewhere, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, if you're on stage, if you're, you know, in front of a camera, you can't hide, man.
Right. And it's amazing because they are two completely different things. Like there's definitely that feeling of being on stage, you know, coming out and hitting that first power chord, you know, hearing the crowd, you know, going. There's definitely something to that. I also dabbled in the punk world there for a while. I had a band called Hearts Bleed Black, you know, and like definitely dabbled in the punk rock world. Grew up definite big punk rock fan, so I understand what you're talking about there. But there's also that instant gratification of playing music and being on stage. And then, you know, with theater, you have the instant gratification of the people around you. But when it's in film, you have that elongated, you know, you get to do this and it's there forever. It's in that print forever. So I definitely see how they're two completely different animals, but both in the world of entertainment, they could both mean a lot to you. So you've been a part of a movie that has affected even friends of mine so much with The Taking of Deborah Logan. It's a movie that obviously I reached out to you because I was such a big fan of the film, and getting to know you better has been super rad. But in order to become a part of the horror world, horror has to start for you somewhere, Jeremy. So I want to go back to the past here for a little bit. And I want to talk about what got you started in the horror genre, your first horror movie. And Jeremy, your first horror movie was?
Nightmare on Elm Street. I believe it was 3, The Dream Warriors.
What an amazing first film. While I will always say A Nightmare on Elm Street is one of the most perfect horror movies that exists, I think that A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 is probably even the most entertaining in that franchise alone. It's such a fun film. And this is one of the few films in a slasher movie where you're actively rooting for the good guys. You know, most of the time you're rooting for your Chucky, you're rooting for your Jason, you're rooting for your Freddy. But this is one of those rare times where every character you fall in love with, and they have their own backstories, and you get so entwined with these characters. And do you remember about how old you were the first time you had seen it?
Oh God. I was probably about 7 or 8 years old, man. I used to hang out with my cousins and my aunt and uncle during the school breaks, and this was when HBO was just coming out, and I'm kind of telling on myself there age-wise. But every night at 8 o'clock, they would show like a new horror movie, and I remember the first one that we started with was Nightmare on Elm Street 3, and like being that young, like a lot of that imagery like definitely stuck with me. And it was the Freddy head snake thing that was trying to eat Patricia Arquette. Like that was that took like a good week or two to, digest, get over, like, oh, and feel like Freddy's head was going to come bursting through a wall somewhere in my house. So,
Right. And that's what an amazing scene that is, because you take the first Nightmare on Elm Street where Freddy Krueger's in that film for me. I think he's got 7 minutes worth of screen time in the original film. And in
yeah.
the second one, they definitely go with a whole darker, still a lot of Freddy in the shadows. He doesn't look the same. But and then 3, this is where you get Robert Englund, the charismatic character, where you really do fall in love with Freddy because of his one-liners, his jokes, and he's still just pure fucking evil. He hasn't gone all the way over the top yet. So we kind of just talked about it a little bit just now, but which scene was it from Dream Warriors that affected you the most?
Oh yeah, it's definitely the Freddy head snake. Definitely. And it stuck with me not only, when we watched it, but for like years after, I had that vivid memory of watching it when I was a kid. And then when I got a little bit older, like in high school range, like I started thinking of it again. I was like, what is this imagery in my head? Like I got to go back and check out this franchise, and went back to it and was like, I had a quick moment of being a 7 or 8 year old of like, oh my God. But I thought,
Motherfucker, you've haunted me for years.
right. And I halfway knew it. Like you're always there. The performance also from Patricia Arquette, I thought like super sold it. But if we're going for scream queens, like that was a perfect scene.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any way to doubt that. And another thing about this movie is this also steps up the kills for A Nightmare on Elm Street. And if I'm not wrong, this one has the most kills of the original 3, not counting the poolside massacre in part 2, just because that's fucking insanity. But
Yeah.
do you remember which kill it was from from Nightmare on Elm Street 3 that affected you the most?
The syringe fingers is just like, oh God.
The syringe fingers, I think, really, really killed me, because that's what, she had beaten it. She had beaten her addiction, and that's the epitome of evil, to use that against her. This is where you really know that Freddy's evil. And if you watch that scene, she almost gives in there at the end when she's got the mouths on her arm. She almost just gives in, like she knows it's gonna happen. Like, this is it for me. And it's a heartbreaking scene, because battling addiction, overcoming your addiction, and then having it forced back into you is such an awful thought for anybody that's had that struggle in their life. And another thing about this movie is, we talked about the kids and the kills, but there's a lot of real genuine comedy that comes along with this movie, and a lot of great one-liner. Like Kincaid is one of my favorite characters in the whole franchise of A Nightmare on Elm Street. But what would you say your favorite scene from Dream Warriors is?
Probably the wizard kill, right? The wizard kill is probably definitely up there. And kind of like you were saying earlier, as much as you're rooting for these kids, these heroes, and really pulling for them to survive, like I think there's that moment where Freddy quips about, how silly this whole wizard shit is, that it almost turns it back on the audience, where you're just like, oh yeah, I guess it is kind of silly. But at the same time, like I was pulling for you, man.
Right. You goofy bastard.
Yeah, so that was definitely a good moment for the family, where we're pulling for this kid, like, yeah, he's got the powers and all this kind of stuff. And then when it happened, we all kind of went, right.
I feel that way about Fuck the prime time, bitch. When his head comes out of the TV and he shoves her head into it, like that's another one for me. That's just, dude, I'm telling you right now, like little Kenny, when I was a kid, I'd play video games, man, and I'd get to the end boss, and I'd be like, welcome to primetime, bitch. Like I'd be in my room rocking out. Like that was me, man. So that's how much that scene truly affected me. I can't tell you on my fingers and toes how many times I've said that throughout my life. I feel like that to me is when I truly fell in love with Freddy Krueger, which is, I fell in love with this child killer, but like, that's when I knew, like, this guy's the shit. Like, he is so amazing. And the next question I have is a little bit tricky, because we talk about A Nightmare on Elm Street, and it did recently get remade in 2010, but would you like to see nowadays a new, not so much a remake, but a new spin on the Dream Warriors? Like, they've done the remake of A Nightmare on Elm Street, maybe build off that with the idea or the concept of the Dream Warriors? Is that something you'd like to see, or is it one where you'd like to kind of make it stay in the past?
I wouldn't mind revisiting it. I wouldn't mind, taking another crack at it. I think there's a lot of validity in not necessarily just the reboot, but I think there's something about reintroducing a new generation to something that was iconic to us. It's a delicate thing to revisit that sort of thing. I just watched the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre on Netflix. So I think that there's a nuance to it. And with the reboot of Nightmare, I think it deserves another chance. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I think audiences kind of split on it, but I think that there's still a lot of great stuff in that franchise that could be revisited. So why not? Let's do another crack at it.
And I've talked about this before. A Nightmare on Elm Street 2010 did something that Robert Englund could never do. And that is make me hate Freddy Krueger.
Yeah.
Like I could never hate Freddy Krueger when it was Robert Englund. I mean, I get it. He's a child killer. We're not supposed to root for him, but we did because that's the energy and the character and the charisma that he had. But I'm not knocking the new guy. I'm not knocking him at all. He was great in The Watchmen and he played the role great. But like I said, he did it. He made me hate this child killer. When he's licking Nancy's face and she's like, fuck you. And he's like, that sounds fun. I'm like, I fucking hate this guy. Like, please let this guy die. You know what I mean? Like, so that's what the remake did for me. It went in that darker direction where I hated Freddy. And a lot of people were like, oh man, this is stupid. I don't like Freddy. You're not supposed to. He's a child killer. Like we're not supposed to like the guy. So he did what he set out to do in that role.
One of the things that me and my friends used to say when we were kids, we used to do the whole Freddy versus Jason thing before that was a thing, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that we said was that Jason was just stone cold, right? Mm-hmm. He would chase you down. He's like Pepe Le Pew. He would chase you down, kill you. That's the end of the story. But if you look at Freddy, he would make you laugh before he sliced you up.
Right.
So that was kind of our balance. If we wanted to have something that was kind of ruthless, we would go to the Friday series. But if we wanted something that was entertaining, which was strange to say, but if we wanted something that was scary and entertaining, you looked at Freddy, and you're absolutely right. What they were able to do with the reboot was that it took a lot of the humor out of it, which I think stunned a lot of audiences. But if you look at what it actually is, this child molester, this child killer, you're not supposed to like him. And so it was tip top in the reboot.
Completely agree with you. And one thing, the reason I bring that up is because if they did a reboot or even a continuation of the Dream Warriors, my favorite scene from that movie, the one that, really scarred me the most, is when he's got him as a puppet and he's walking him through the hospital with his tendons. And I love that scene because sometimes you see the tendons, other times you don't. You just see him walking and he goes through that door. Like, that's one of those scenes where every time I watch it, I feel for that. And you got the rest of the kids screaming and Joey's running through the hallway, hitting stuff, with the lunch pail. Yeah. And like you feel the pain and anxiety. And like that type of suspense never works in a Nightmare on Elm Street movie because, like I said, you're always like, get him, Freddy. I don't give a shit. But in this moment, you're like, oh my God, like my heart's breaking. I'm so scared and worried. So I definitely think that the movie it definitely has its place in history for me. Well, Jeremy, we talked about your first horror movie being the Dream Warriors and how that affected you. But now I want to throw you a curveball here for a second. My little buddy Ghostface has a question for you. What's your favorite scary movie, Jeremy? What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
Favorite horror movie of all time. And we're still keeping on the slightly humorous track of things. I gotta say, my favorite horror movie is Army of Darkness.
Nice, man. This is my boomstick.
Shop smart, shop S-smart. Oh man.
And I'm a Detroit boy, man. So whenever Bruce Campbell's my dude, Sam Raimi, all their love for Detroit, it's just, I'm with you, man. Army of Darkness. And it's funny because
Michigan boys.
Army of Darkness is not my favorite film in the Evil Dead franchise, but it's easily the one I've quoted the most. And it's probably the one I know the best. Give me some sugar, baby. It's the one. Or like, what about when you got all the little ashes when they're doing the London Bridge is falling down scene? Bruce Campbell is just such a one-man show that he's, Evil Dead 2. It's mostly him throughout the whole movie. Army of Darkness, you're really focused on Bruce, and he steals the show all the time. So, man, that's a perfect answer. I love Army of Darkness. I love Bruce Campbell. I'm in, man. I love it.
The Army of Darkness was actually the one that got me into the Evil Dead franchise. There was a video store that my grandfather used to take me to, and he was the first one to kind of like, give me the wink and say, as a kid, if you want to go pick up something rated R, go ahead. We'll just, keep it quiet for the rest of the family. And the first one that I picked out, like I had a whole video store of things to pick. And the one that caught my eye was Army of Darkness. And so I loved that movie so much that it opened up the world of Evil Dead for me. And I went back and watched the first two, and initially was surprised. I was like, whoa, these are completely different.
Dark, man.
Like, okay. But going back and watching, I was like, I completely understood it. Like the Evil Dead 1 and Evil Dead 2, like, oh, such classic movies and such unique experiences that I kind of look at Army of Darkness as kind of like the cherry on top. It's kind of like, nice.
Yeah, I think Army of Darkness, well, because they couldn't use the Evil Dead name anymore. They went to a different studio, so they didn't own the rights to the Evil Dead name. So I love it. Sam Raimi was like, I can't do that film. You know what? I'm going to make my own fucking film. I'm going to continue my story. I won't use the Evil Dead name, but you know what? I'm going to have the most fun I've ever had and just make a movie that I just want to make. I got the creative control, and I'm going to have a blast and just go with it. So definitely, like I said, I love the pick. So Jeremy, I've had an amazing time hanging out with you, man. This seriously has meant a lot to me. But before I let you go, before the end credits roll, I got one last question for you. We're going to go back to the Dream Warriors. And what we're going to do is we're going to rank this on a skull count. Now, we're not being critics. We're not judging it on production, score, acting, none of the above. What we're doing here is we are just strictly judging it on how much it affected you on first viewing. So 0 skulls, not effective. 5, very effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. What would your ranking of the Dream Warriors be?
In perfect Star Search style, I would say 4 3/4.
There you go. We're just going to cut that little part of the skull off and let them keep their eye. So, so like I said, before the credits roll, guys, the third act is here. We're about to draw the curtain. But before you do, I've got some links down here in the description that need a click. And you can follow Jeremy on all his social media links. Make sure you keep it up to date with everything he does, not only in the acting, but in the music world as well. So you don't have to wait for me to give you the updates on them. You can get them yourself with these links in the description. So thank you so much, Jeremy. Don't go anywhere, please, my friend. I have a couple more questions for you. Everyone else, as always, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.